What's up, you beautiful beasts, and welcome to the video where we are looking at the perfect survival game, according to Kotaku. If you've been here for a while, you'll know that survival games are one of my favorite genres of all time. Starting with zero and then carving out a small base in a world that's actively trying to kill you is a loop that I cannot get enough of. So when I saw such a bold claim about a game that I had originally avoided, I just had to see it for myself. In this video, we'll be digging through the dirt of Icarus to see if it actually lives up to such a lofty title. I'll be breaking down the Kotaku article to see if the claims are legit while sharing my highs and lows from my time on the ground, and by the end of it, we'll find out if Icarus is truly the perfect survival game. But let's start with the basics. What the f is Icarus? Originally released in December 2021, Icarus comes from Rocketworks, founded by Dean Rocket Hall, a name which carries so much weight in the survival genre as he's the man behind one of the biggest original survival mods, DayZ. I have lost countless hours to that mod, but looking back, it was honestly kind of a nightmare. You'd spend 3 hours sprinting towards the northwest airfield just to get sniped by a bush and lose everything. At the time, I thought this was peak gaming, but in hindsight, I might have just been a bit of a masochist. Icarus followed the same tough love philosophy at launch and was rocky. Between the weird gameplay loops and bizarre real-life death timer, it was an incredibly hard sell. Back then, if you didn't extract your character before the mission timer hit 0 in the real world, your character was simply deleted. It was this strange high-stakes hybrid of a survival game and a roguelike, unless you worked full-time, in which case you'd just die. They have since fixed this issue with the addition of multiple modes, but this makes for an incredibly confusing new player experience, which we'll get into later. Kudos to the Icarus team though, as they seem to release an update every week, and the transparency is fantastic to see from an indie dev team. There is something else I wanted to address before we jump into the game proper. This game has 20 DLC packs. These range from simple content packs that give you cosmetic items to fully fledged expansions. Most of them are positively rated, but I can't help think it's a tad excessive, especially when a number of the DLCs are just tiny maps called outposts. All that aside though, let's jump into the base game and see how perfect that is before we start adding extras. Editing Nate here, and unfortunately I need some help upgrading my base, so if you enjoy the video, don't forget to like and subscribe as it is a huge help. Also, let me know what your perfect survival game is down in the comments, and maybe I'll venture into that one in a future video. Upon hitting play for the first time, I am met with one of the most basic character creation screens I've ever seen. We're talking the pumpkin spiced latte of character creation screens. I know I'll never see my character, but that doesn't mean I don't take a little joy in making something I like the look of. That said, the inclusion of a character creation screen in Icarus is something that kind of confuses me. You're forever in a spacesuit, so why let me customize my character rather than just the spacesuit itself? Either way, after I'm done making my survivor, we move on to the aforementioned confusing new player experience. It drops you into the main menu and you're greeted with several buttons and very little explanation. From the four at the top, you have Home, where you select how to play the game, Loadout, where you pick the equipment you'll start with, Workshop, where you'll invest the currencies you unlock on researching new goods, and Biolab, where, well, I actually have no idea. I think it was tied to a DLC or something. And how do I unlock the currencies? No idea. After clicking New on the home option to start the game, I'm immediately greeted with another message outlining how to play. Missions, being the original game mode in which I go out on small ventures, complete them and unlock things to make the next mission easier, of which there's a solid amount to get through without including the DLCs. Open world is a single persistent world where I can do the missions, but in a world that never ends, or Outposts, where it's a much smaller map with simple missions to do. The mission system, by the way, is an awesome addition to the open world game mode, and I'll explain in a little more detail as to why later, but the basic gist is that it constantly gave me something to keep moving towards, a goal in mind or something else, which frankly a lot of survival games kinda lack. It always just boils down to just survive. But at this moment in time, I'm just overwhelmed. Which is the correct option? Am I supposed to do a tutorial first? What are all these additional icons? What are exotics? I just end up picking the mission option and accidentally end up stumbling into what is, in the loosest form of the word, a tutorial. And before I know it, I'm drop-podding into the world. Immediately after those doors open, I am met with a genuinely beautiful world. The greenery is lush, the vistas stretch on, and the land is bright. I then spend the next 10 minutes staring at the floor while I stuff my pockets with literally everything in a 5-meter radius, which is pretty standard for survival games. At least I'm not punching trees. As I explore the game more, I level up and begin taking a look at the tech tree. Every action you take in game, from hunting, gathering, or crafting, gives you XP. Once you level up, you get crafting and talent points you can invest to better yourself in certain areas of the game and unlock more items to progress. I always enjoy these kinds of systems because I love playing survival games with friends, and when you have these systems, you all end up falling into different specializations. One person becomes the cook, the other the weaponsmith, and one of you becomes the builder, and it's really good fun when everybody has their own role. Don't fret though, because Icarus has a special solo tree for when you're playing with yourself. Again. The tutorial ends up being a simple little checklist of things to do on the left side of my screen, such as unlocking the torch, building a shelter, and making a bed. Easy enough, and I'm set to it, but I'm soon greeted by one of the biggest obstacles that Icarus boasts about. Its storms. One of the main survival aspects of Icarus is the fact that the planet it's set on, Icarus, underwent terraforming, and unfortunately, it didn't go to plan. This has caused brutal storms and poisoned the air, introducing one of the most irritating mechanics the game has to offer: oxygen. Sadly, the first storm that I got to witness, considering the game makes a fairly big deal of advertising them, was pretty weak. A little dribble of rain and some wind, but little did I know, this was just the tip of the iceberg. After getting a little damp, I'd managed to stuff my pockets full of enough rocks and twigs to make the first set of equipment and level up enough to unlock wooden buildings, and before I knew it, I was making my first shed in the woods. One of my favorite elements of survival games is the base building. I love it. But holy shit, if this game didn't wind me up something awful with its building mechanics. At this point in my journey, however, everything was fine. I managed to build my first little starter shed, the simple 4x4 cube which you build in every survival game, and I was happy, mostly. Something I did find annoying was that the ground was covered in so much clutter, I'd lose the tree I just cut down amongst the huge amount of bushes. And as always, the tools have degradation, because of course they fucking do. Look, developers, if adding degradation simply boils down to me having to open my inventory every now and again to right-click on a tool and click repair, which costs me a small amount of resources, why bother? What does that add? Have it instead so that tools get dull, and the more you use them, the less resources they give you, or the more stamina it takes to use them, and then you have to return to base to sharpen them again. Don't just make them absolutely useless, it's beyond frustrating. One thing I do quickly notice as I'm playing is that it takes a fairly large amount of resources to build anything. This goes doubly for when you need to build a bed. Beds take fur, and to get fur, you need to kill animals, which quickly leads me to culling a significant portion of the forest. I do, however, consider it revenge though, considering some wolves had managed to lock me in my own house, the bastards. Carrying on, midway through my slaughter of the small forest critters like the misguided Disney princess I always wanted to be, the game alerts me I'm running out of oxygen, to which I reply, what the fuck? How am I running out of oxygen but the wildlife is unaffected? Also, if I'm in a suit which I need to supply with oxygen, how am I eating or drinking? Do I open my mask to contaminate myself just to shove poorly cooked meat in my face hole? Look, I realize there needs to be a certain suspension of disbelief in all video games. That's just how they work. But Icarus constantly seems to take the longest way around the shortest route, introducing just needless mechanics. There are two quotes from the Kotaku article that I want to talk about. The first one is that modern survival games are trying to do too much, which I simply disagree with. Instead, what I think a lot of modern survival games are trying to do is stand out amongst the zoo of similar games. It's why we've seen titles like Void Train and Subnautica that take the initial idea of building a base and filling water/food meters and apply a variant such as being on an ethereal train or in a waterlogged world. The second thing that's mentioned is that Icarus has realistic hunger and thirst meters, which in my experience just wasn't true and echoed a lot of other survival games in that I need to eat enough food to feed a small country. It needs to be said that I mean no disrespect to the article's author, John Walker, and I think he does have some incredibly valid points throughout the article, but these two, along with saying that abiotic factor is horribly inaccessible, are things that I just flat disagree on. I highly recommend going to read it for yourself, and I've left a link to it in the description to this video. Getting back to my mission, I eventually managed to complete the checklist after finding ores which contained the oxygen that I needed, don't ask, and soon saw myself flying back up to my home space station, successful in my task, for which I was rewarded fuck all. Completing the first mission gives you enough credits to research a single first item, but not enough to actually buy the thing. After this, I decided to pick a second mission, which quite frankly felt like a massive waste of time. I was tasked to shoot a certain number of holographic bears within a time limit, but just couldn't manage it, no matter how hard I tried. All the while, random wildlife would turn up and fight me in the middle of a run, and I just ended up getting frustrated. I like to think I'm a pretty decent shot, but after my fifth or so run, I just threw in the towel and booted up open world instead. And holy shit, what a huge difference. If there was one thing that I would change about this game immediately, it would be to get rid of the mission-based mode. Maybe I'm missing the point of them and should have dug further, but the moment I went into the open world, Icarus clicked far better than it had in my first few hours fucking about with missions. Open world is your standard survival affair. You pick a location, some harder than others based on resources, and you're dropped in to begin your new life. I was happily surprised to learn my progress from the mission mode had carried over, meaning I wasn't starting completely from scratch as I kept my levels, my blueprints, and my talent tree. And so began my true survival experience. First things first, I needed to get a shelter built. I wanted to properly poke the building system with a stick, as they're my number one priority in a survival game. If the building sucks, I'm going to fall off that game pretty quickly, and unfortunately for Icarus, it didn't take long to start pissing me off. When it comes to building a base, for me, it's all about aesthetics. I want my home to look cool and feel functional. I want the work and effort I'm putting into it to be reflected by the outcome. And sadly, Icarus fell short in a whole bunch of ways, which for a game boasting 20 DLCs felt kinda shitty. The biggest thing that wound me up was how not all building pieces seemed to work together. A half wall, for instance, couldn't have a floor attached to it, meaning you have no choice but to build at full size unless you get really finicky. Now, I'm not saying you couldn't build a stunning base with the tools that are in the game, but there's a whole bunch of quality of life things which are just missing. Also, and this is really pulling at straws, but a lot of the tool benches are just static models. I'll put a bench to craft something and walk away considering there's a timer for them to be crafted, but there's no way to know if it's still crafting. And also, why is it automated? This prehistoric anvil is just crafting nails on its own. And to add to the confusion, some crafting benches have visual changes. The campfire puts meat on it when you're cooking meat, but if you put meat on a drying rack, nothing changes. I know this sounds really pedantic, but all of these things come together in a survival game which make it feel good. There are just too many bits within Icarus that just feel at odds with each other. With all that being said though, none of these little issues were enough for me to down tools and uninstall. I was actually having quite a lot of fun regardless, so on I marched, felling a small forest, hunting animal after animal, and weathering some horrific storms. In my notes, I've got "weather is impactful but looks like shit," which I've had to frantically scribble out as I played through the game. Some of the storms are genuinely terrifying. The audio team have done an amazing job as you hunker down in your house, the walls tearing away in chunks as you hope it passes, but I have still got a bit of an issue. If you're outside in a storm, a little meter pops up saying storm exposure, and as it builds, you slowly die. How fucking boring. I got caught in a storm labeled severe winds, and because I stood out in the wind for a little bit too long, I fell unconscious. That is so dull. Why isn't there debris flying across that might hit me? Stampeding wildlife, perhaps? Instead, it's just a gauge that fills until I die. I'd get that if it was maybe heat exposure or frostbite, but in a lightning storm, the only threat should be the lightning, not some UI element. And for a game that boasts the planet is trying to kill you, it just seems like a shitty way of going about it. And then this leads me to another awkward mechanic. A rainstorm was going on and I was bundled up in my base, so I thought, why not try and sleep through it? And then I learned sleeping doesn't do anything but advance the time of day. The storm doesn't stop. Your crafting doesn't advance. The only change is that the sun comes up. Nothing else progresses. This seems incredibly weird to me. Maybe it's to stop players avoiding all storms, but if that's the case, just stop me from sleeping during them. Continuing on my journey of discovery, I eventually had to go forth and find iron, and this led me to actually having to explore. When I play survival games, I'm usually a bit of a homebody, and being forced to go further afield got me excited. Away I went, looking for a cave. It took me a decent amount of time to find one, and I genuinely enjoyed the exploration. I even panicked when walking into the darkness of the cave. It was flush with iron and weird creatures, and wait a second, what's this debuff? Yeah, so it turns out when you go into caves, you automatically get a debuff, and then the longer you spend in the cave, the more likely you're to get cave sickness. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. This is what I don't get about Icarus. Why does this exist? Why am I being punished for trying to explore and find new things? If it was a noxious gas and I needed a gas mask to pass it, fine. Radioactive waste and I needed a hazmat suit, cool. A dark cave and I'm a few meters from the opening and this is my first metal tier and now the game is just punishing me. Either way, I had the metal and could create the contact device, which allowed me to begin doing missions in the open world. And this was cool. Using the contact device, you're able to take on simple missions and operations. The simple missions are just that. Build a structure, find a thing, kill a creature, and so on. The operations are the missions from the mission selection at the start, meaning you can just do them in the open world without having to worry about bullshit timers. I took a simple mission and it had me construct a tower to place a beacon. This was fun. It forced me to explore, made me consider having to build outposts, plan the build and such. I opted for this fire tower-like idea, went about it, and while I do have my gripes, the building system is fairly competent and works. I was just able to erect my tower in no time, and then, just when I was giving this game some credit, I learned the ladders don't snap to anything but themselves, making life incredibly awkward. Anyway, I accomplished the mission and left the project half done. The small irritations were beginning to mount up and I just wanted to continue. I snatched up my rewards and returned home before finding a huge iron resource hidden behind a stone cave wall. Filling my pockets, I returned to base and decided to take a proper look at the full tech tree and what I was going to spend my newfound riches on. I usually avoid doing this as I like to figure things out as I go and avoid spoilers, but I felt my time with Icarus was coming to an end, so why not? The game has some impressive systems as you get further into it, which I'd not even touched yet, such as animal taming and husbandry to farming, electricity and machining. It's got multiple biomes and hazards that I'd not even glanced at yet. There is so much to do in Icarus, but I don't know if I care enough to do it. The problem is that Icarus doesn't give me anything I've not already done over and over, while hamstringing me with odd mechanics and paying very little attention to detail. It is exactly as Walker, the original author of the article, was saying, Icarus keeps it simple. It doesn't do anything really to stand out amongst all the other survival games, and what it does do just feels somewhat limp. It either feels like it wasn't quite finished or there are arbitrary obstacles in my way just because. I put together all the iron I'd found, made tools and upgraded my walls before I stopped for the night, and sadly, I've not been drawn to play the game since. The question I asked at the start of the video was if Icarus is the perfect survival game, but the thing is, perfection is subjective. Perfection is like coffee. What I might love might be nothing but bitter sadness for someone else. Towards the end of the article, Walker says, I have the simplest little hut with my bedroll, a fireplace, all my crafting tables, and a collection of chests, and I venture out on my increasingly complicated tasks in between getting my daily chores complete, and I'm so happy. So, if you were to ask me if I thought Icarus was the perfect survival game that no one is talking about, I'd say no. It's a damn good survival game that more people probably should play, but it's not perfect. For John, however, and I imagine quite a few other people, fuck yeah, it's perfect. Have you played Icarus? What did you think? Am I, as always, full of shit? Let me know in the comments what your perfect survival game is, and maybe I'll check it out for the next video. Don't forget to like and subscribe and check out my Twitch down in the description, and if I'm lucky, I'll catch you in the next one.